We are live. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we are live. And this morning on the Huddle, I have a question for you, live streamers, content creators, and even aspiring podcasters. Are you interested in creating and starting a podcast show? Not just a podcast, but starting a successful one? Well, this morning on the Huddle, we're going to get into 8 great questions on helping you, most importantly, helping me, because it's long overdue on being able to start and to launch a successful podcast. And we have an expert authority who's going to walk us through the process. So do me a favor, grab yourself a cup of coffee or some green tea, huddle up. It's time for the Huddle. Praise the Lord, everyone. Welcome to the Huddle. I'm your host, Walter Strong. If you're new here and you want to broaden your reach, your impact, and income through online video, we welcome you to the show. And as we said in our opening this morning, we're going to be discussing the steps, the process on how to not just start a podcast, but to start a successful one. Maybe you have been working behind the scenes in the creative lab saying, I got to get into this podcast game and launch my podcast show. But the problem is you're having difficulty getting the plane on the runway. You ain't even got to the runway where you can take off. You having problems getting the plane out of the garage to the runway, if you're honest like me. And so this morning, we've brought on an expert authority, one of our good friends from the Huddle community, who's going to walk us through. But before we bring on the guest, let's see who's joining us this morning in the live chat of YouTube. Good morning to my good friend, Tech Troublemaker. He's a troublemaker. He's a troublemaker. The man is a troublemaker in a good way. Good morning, sir. How you doing? And if you're joining us live in YouTube, let us know where you're watching us from. Give us a hashtag Team Live. Those of you who are watching us on LinkedIn this morning, please let us know where you're watching us from. Give us a hashtag Team Live. And if you are part of the crew, the posse, the online squad, Team Replay, oh yeah, let us know that you're a part of the greatest crew on Replay in the comments section. And so, man, he's not a stranger to the Huddle. And I thought about, oh man, I got to get his short bio. But when you've known someone for a while and you've partnered together, you've collaborated together, and you've seen the body of work, sometimes a short bio won't just do. And so what I can tell you is this man who we're going to bring on today is not only a successful, established podcaster, not only an expert content creator, but someone I consider, though we've never met each other in person because we're in 2 different countries, but in the midst of a pandemic, to develop a diamond relationship with this individual, I truly call this person a friend. And so I want to welcome to some, but to others who may be meeting him to the first time, he has a podcast, YouTube called Podcast Creators Hub. Let's put a great welcome in the chat for our good friend, Mr. Ash Borland, all the way from London.
Hello,
good morning,
I
sir.
love it. Thank you. And you are very much my friend too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How are you doing? How are you doing?
Very good. I'm very excited. I love coming on here. So it's nice to, I'm always going to be sat here anyway on a Saturday. So it's nice to actually be on the show again. I love it. I'm super excited.
Perfect. We want to say good morning to our dear sister Florence from Equip Institute, the live stream moderator, Master Frank Jackson in the house. Good morning. As the chat is jumping, Ash, like I said, you are not a stranger to us in the Huddle community, but there may be a few who may be on LinkedIn or YouTube. And so I want to just ask you real quick before we get into this masterclass on starting your first podcast successfully, a little about yourself and your experience when you first came on the Huddle as a guest.
Yes, a little bit about myself. By trade, I'm a marketing coach. I work with mortgage brokers, financial advisors in the UK. But my hobby, and as you can probably tell by looking at me around here, the thing I do on a Saturday is I watch Walter's show, which is interesting as my hobby, really. But my hobby outside of work is podcasting. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's because my own my mortgage coaching business was built via a podcast, and so because of that, I've been lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to have a number of shows get into like charts and be ranked in like global playlists and everything like that. So it's been a crazy time, and so that's me in a nutshell. I've set up a YouTube channel called Podcast Creators Hub to teach people how to learn the stuff maybe that I learned before, completely just a hobby channel and passion. From my experience, how I met Walter, you talk about what it was like. You reached out to me, it's got to be over a year ago now. I was interviewing some YouTubers, people like Nick Nimmin and people like that I know you'd had Benji Travis on this show. And you reached out to me, and I remember thinking, yeah, sure, I'll come on the show. And I've been on many podcasts and many people, talked to many people a lot. And I was just thinking, okay, this is just another show. I'm on another thing. And I remember you doing your introduction, and I was sitting in the green room in StreamYard, and I remember thinking, whoa, this guy is very different to anybody else I have ever met, because you did this such a hype. It was like a wrestling intro, and obviously I'm from England, so it's very very different, and the culture is so different. And I just remember thinking, whoever this guy is, like, I need to know him more. And I was kind of blown away by it. And then from there, I'd been on your show many times before, after that. And every time you've gone to a new level. And I remember saying this to my wife, just to give context to you as how good you are and where you now formed a place in my weekly routine. Was I remember sitting in bed, my wife was pregnant, and I said, I was watching a video of you, and she said, what are you doing? I said, I know some of the best YouTubers, like literally some of the best YouTube educators on the planet. I know them. I said, I've had them on my show. I talked to them. I said, but this guy has got me hooked and I just cannot stop watching his content. And I've been like was your number one fan until Florence came in the building, up until that point. So I love it. It's a great thing. So yeah, you're a very much like a gem in my life. I'm very honored to be a part of this still, and the fact that this is still a year plus on, and we're even stronger now. So yeah, you're crazy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, man. Let me tell you something. Just having you a part of, and to those of you in the chat, we're going to get into the content, but just gotta give people their flowers. Even when we talked about starting a community, and I was like, I'm trying to encourage you. Say, Ash, man, we should start a community and you should lead it. And he was like, no. You should lead it because you got the ideas, you got the blueprint. And Huddle community, this is the man who was basically, Florence, you talk about someone pushing you off the mountain with gentle gloves. This is the one who pushed me off to do Huddle.
We've had many, and that's why I think it's such a strange time, because it was COVID lockdown and all that stuff. And I've had like video chats with you while walking my dog. I've had video chats with you while I was sat in bed one time. I remember you were looking for a job hunt, and we were talking about different things. It's been such a weird, yes. But to watch how the Huddle community has grown, is just a real joy. I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think you're amazing at what you do.
Thank you. And so, hey, we got all the housekeeping out the way. Let's get into the content. As we always say, let's fire up the stream deck. And we got to get it all to the right stuff because we're already on the wrong slide.
All right. We were testing it earlier.
Exactly. So we're talking about 8 great tips, 8 great questions that we all need to answer if we're going to not just start, but start a successful podcast. So get your pen, get your pad, make sure you watch the replay on this. several times because at the end of this live stream, Ash is going to give us some homework on our launch date. So, Tech, Florence, Frank, those of you who are on LinkedIn, let's get into this. All right. So, question number one, Ash. I know it's a simple question, but it's a question that I think a lot of us underestimate. What is really a podcast? Is it an audio only? Is it video? What is truly a podcast, in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's one of those questions that we have to start it with this episode with this, because I think it wouldn't frame everything else we're going to talk about. So podcast, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, but traditionally it was audio only. So it was an audio only way of consuming content. Traditionally that would be in like a conversational manner, like a radio show on demand. And it would be hosted through something called an RSS feed. Now that's this would be what was a podcast. Now, what is a podcast in 2023, that I think that definition has very much shifted. And I think the definition now is, I would say a podcast is is more of a style now. It's more of a style, and it's a style of communication. I would say that if you think of it as like a vlogging, there's like a vlogging style, there's a talking head style of videos, there's there's very well edited type of videos, and I think a podcast is a style now, which is very much this conversational piece of content. And I think it really hinges around this idea of conversational being the biggest point. Now, when I say conversational, that can be conversational with me and you. Like this really technically would be like it would be a podcast. It is a podcast. Whether where you choose to host it, we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, as we go through. But what this is a podcast. This style is a podcast style. It's conversational. It's quite raw. It's not over edited, and people like it because of that. So, and that can be the same with a solo podcast. A solo podcast on this would be the exact same thing, but it's a conversation. And I think and without the over edited. And if you think about YouTube videos, they are much more edited. They're much more precise. Retention is less important, all of that type of stuff. But that's in a nutshell what I would say a podcast is.
Great. Let's go to question 2. So I have this desire to want to.
This is like a test. Nice one.
Definitely. So I have a foundation on what a podcast is, but what is the best type of podcast hosting service? How do I get myself on Apple and Spreaker, and even now with YouTube being able to provide? But if we're just talking the traditional audio only, how do I get my podcast on one of those platforms?
Perfect question. Great question. So people get confused with this with podcasting. It's quite simple if we break it down into a simple understanding. There's 3 parts to making a podcast. One part is the production of it, which is obviously producing it, creating it, like what we're doing now. That's part 1. Part 3, and the reason why I'm missing part 2 is part 3 is distribution. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of that stuff.
Okay.
That is where it goes to the content. That's where it goes to the people who listen to it. Now, the reason where podcasting can get a bit confusing compared to everything else is that normally for everywhere else, like YouTube, Instagram, social media, things like that, they will you will host, which is where you put your content. You will host your content in the place that distributes it. So you will upload that video to YouTube, and then it will distribute that video to people. You'll upload that content to Instagram, it will distribute it to people. Whereas with podcasting, and it's not very complicated, but it gets people confused, is that a podcasting there's a bit in the middle, step 2, and it's really, that's the hosting. So step 3 is the distribution, which is Apple and Spotify, but step 2 is hosting, and this is a third-party company that will host your audio, not video, audio for your podcast, and that effectively creates you what is known as an RSS feed, and that it will create as a small website where then these distribution channels can go and get the information from you. Now that brings with it some problems. It also it brings with it a lot of good stuff in the idea that it's completely decentralized. You control it. You can distribute to as many places as you want, which is amazing. But it also brings with it the problem of monetization, because it's very hard to track stuff in the same way that you could with something like Facebook, YouTube, Google, like Instagram. So that's what a host is. When it comes to what the best ones are, and there's loads of stuff, I'm sure we'll go into those as we go through, because I don't want to go too deep into different things.
Okay.
If the best one, there are a number of platforms you can choose. There's only one real free one. So if you're a new podcaster, the best thing to do, I would say, is to choose a free one. Now, this used to be called Anchor. So it's formerly known as Anchor, and it's now known as Spotify for podcasters. That's the only truly free podcast hosting service. So if you're someone who's going at this as a hobby, that's the best one for you to choose. If you're somebody who's going at this from a business, or you want some form of quality, a higher level of quality, then there are other ones out there that will require paying. For me, and I can just speak to I've used lots of them, but for me, I use Buzzsprout. It has a host of great services that go on top of the base package, which would be what Spotify for podcasters is. So I won't go into what they are, because that's a whole other thing. But the best ones is, if you're going to do it for a business and you've got budget, go to something like Buzzsprout. If you haven't got budget, or you're trialing it out, maybe you've got a live show and you just think like the Huddle. Let's say we've got the live show and we're thinking, I've got this audio, I can throw it up there. I want to try and get it out for more people. I would just go with the Spotify podcasters, and you can always swap it later. It's absolutely fine.
Gotcha. And let's say if I initially start out doing this from a hobby interest aspect, but now become more serious with it in doing from a business or from more of a seeking to gain income from it, how difficult is the process in transitioning from over to, say, a free version versus now to someone like Buzzsprout?
Very simple. Very simple. You just redirect this RSS feed. Okay. So the RSS feed gets redirected. There's a ton of tutorials on how to do it on YouTube and also on the websites. It'll take you about 5 minutes. It can get it's very, very simple. It can get very complicated if you mess it up, but it's nothing to be worried about. I would always start with the free one, unless like I've had multiple shows, nearly all of them have started on the free one, apart from my business show, because I was more informed and I knew what I wanted it for. So that was it. But yeah, it's very easy.
All right. And Florence says here, it's a radio show on demand as one of the best descriptions. Okay. That you've heard. Okay. Yeah, I've heard that. What are your thoughts on that, Ash?
Yeah, I think it's true. That's what it used to be, for sure. I don't know if it's less like that now, but it's still the same. But the old school podcast, like I'm a big Star Wars fan, and Rebel Force Radio is one of my favorite podcasts, and that is very radio on demand inspired. It's the way that they produce it is exactly like a radio show.
Gotcha. All right. So we hit those two questions. Question 3. When should I look to start recording my first episodes? And the reason why I wanted to ask this, because as I was listening to some videos in my research and preparing for this live stream, some individuals said, start doing some episodes, and then once you get your hosting, you have some available. Others were of the opinion that you should pay for your hosting or go with a free version and start doing it. What's your insight on that?
I think you got to do whichever's best for you, to be honest. I was thinking that when there's like different ones, I would say that there's certain scenarios for successful shows, when you should start recording your episodes, you should start recording them once you've done proper research. That's probably the most important thing. Whether you do it to the host or not the host, or before you find a host, like that's kind of not really irrelevant, but in my opinion, it kind of is irrelevant actually. But the most important thing is to know what you're doing it for. That's the most important thing. So when should you start it? When you've got a very clear format and concept, and and a guest list if it's going to be an interview show, a guest list of exactly who you want and why you want them. I think that's very important, because if you approach it like, I'll just make a couple of podcasts and see what happens, that's very it won't really work. It does not the same as YouTube in that way, or like it's in that you can figure it out. It doesn't really work like that. So I would say that's probably the best. You can start recording and record as much as you want once you have a very clear idea of who the listener is, what your goal is, what your frequency is, and I think it's good to have a batch of them before you host. I think that's probably a good idea, potentially.
Okay, great. Hey, Huddle community. We are talking and discussing 8 important questions on helping you not just to start, but to start a successful podcast show. And so if you're getting great value out of this discussion, this important discussion that's going to encourage you to launch that podcast, do me a favor, click that thumbs up button, hit the share button, and share this on your favorite social media platform. Right now, we're live streaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, but some individuals who are interested in podcasting. So utilize the share button to share this on some platforms that an entrepreneur, a business owner, a content creator, a mother who has some wisdom, who wants to impart to other women on the importance of motherhood, and wants to start a podcast. This is a great time to share. Tip number 4, why is it important to have someone do your voice intro? And the reason why I asked that, is because I was listening to another podcaster's show, and I kind of posed that question to him, and the person says, "Oh, no, you shouldn't do that, because your audience, when they listen to you, they're going to be listening to you anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes, minimum, or 15 to 30. So to ask them to listen to your intro and your outro, he felt that it was a little more, versus having a different person, it breaks up the show." And I said, okay, that's one person's opinion. Let me get Ash's opinion.
So he was saying that that you shouldn't have an outro and intro at all. Is that what you were saying?
You should, but it shouldn't be the actual person doing the episode.
Okay, so it should be an individual, a different person doing it. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I can come at that question. It comes back to what you want and not want. So there's a good number of things. If you do the introduction, mm-hmm. it's incredibly intimate, so that's cool. It comes down to the benefit you want. So like, if you do the introduction, Alex Hormozy is a great example of this. Alex Hormozy, his podcasts are all him introducing his shows, all the time. So, which makes it feel like incredibly intimate and connected, even though he's this massive guy in the business space. By him doing it on his own, it's not a team, and he could pay anyone he wanted. He's worth like $100 million. He literally could pay anyone. It makes it feel intimate. So there's an intimacy to doing it on your own. Okay. I think to what the person was saying, but there's also pros and cons. To what the person was saying before, I disagree in the idea of, if someone's going to give you 20 minutes, they'll give you 21 minutes. It's like the decision of retention, I think at that point, is not that important. It's not the same as YouTube. I think sometimes podcasters talk about retention too much. Most people are there. You can go in different lengths, and there's lots of stuff, but that's not as important. Now, so the intimacy can be very good. The problem with it, if you do it you do your own, can be that it can sound amateurish. So it can sound quite amateur, and that's fine. That's fine. But it can highlight that. The pros to having somebody do it, someone else do it, and I do both. So I have one show that has me do it, and then one show that is someone else. The pros to having someone else do it, and there are more pros, I think, from a business standpoint, is there's a number of ways. First one is it's kind of a weird, it's like an NLP hypnosis type trick, which is if someone introduces you from a different voice, it instantly adds more credibility, and you are effectively stepping into the space. So what I mean by that is, the way I saw it on an NLP thing was this guy said, if I stand here and come on stage and say, I'm so excited to bring on this individual. They are all the stuff you said to me at the beginning. This individual, this person has done these things and this thing and all these accolades. And then that person walks on stage. The audience is like, will naturally look at them and go, wow, you technically step into what the space that has been created by the compare. Okay. Whereas if I came on stage and said, hi, nice to meet you. I'm really nice. I'm really excited to tell you because I'm really great. I've done this and this and this and this and this. That has a very different effect. It creates an arrogance and a disconnect of who does this person think he is. So having someone introduce your show and outros and stuff can have a real power of you trying to get a message across that you want what you want. So if you have, and I have mine, it's incredibly over the top. So it's incredibly American. And I work with British mortgage advisors. I work with Americans too, but majority British. It's incredibly American. The brief I gave my audio engineer for this was, I want remember the old school cheesy adverts on Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the video game? I said, I want that. And he was like, okay, I can do that. So it does have a real power in that way. And then because of that, I can have my audio engineer, the guy that I use for my audio imagery, I can have him say anything about me that's positive, like that I'm the best person in the world, and it's not me saying it. So there's a real power there, but it comes down to budget with that because you've got to pay someone, and also comes down to taste, because I know that my intros, outros, and mid rolls, because I use it as mid roll as well. I do the same, all of this stuff. I know that it is very polarizing. And I know in the mortgage industry where for my podcast, business podcast, there's many people who love it and there's many people who don't. There's a lot of people who really do hate it. And I'll get a lot of that, and people will make fun of it, but it's memorable. It's a lot more memorable than me saying, hey, welcome to the show. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, so that is very important, but it really comes down to your preference.
Your preference. And then also in terms of, because there's so many people nowadays who have podcast shows that were started months and years ago, but yet they're not doing anything with it. So it's like you have this crowded niche of people doing something, but how do you stand out? And so it sounds like by going the route of having someone to introduce you and doing, mid-roll and even the outro, it seems like it increases the chance for the new beginner to stand out.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, it really does. And it creates one tip on that is have somebody who is the complete polar opposite to you in regards to sound. So if you're a male, female potentially is a good idea. Or have like with me, I went for extremely 80s cheesy American introduction. Like it's so over the top. That to what our reserved British people are like, so it's so over the top, but so there's no different. Then it's very obvious that it's not, if you've got this incredibly American, it's a very great guy that does the voice, and then I speak, it's clearly a different person. And you got to think about this from an audio perspective. They can't see who's speaking. They can only hear it. So obviously, unless you put a video podcast, but they can't see it. So if you get people who, and I often find this when I work with people or talk to people, and they'll go, I'm trying to find a middle-aged British guy, and I'm like, why? And that's because they're a middle-aged British guy. And I'm like, well, yeah, but then that's just you. And so it's going to be hard for the listener. Whereas if Florence introduced you to under the Huddle, wicked. Another great one, by the way, that intros are ones that are good on that. I just got my head going. Is some of the best shows I've seen, they do community intros. So you could have someone like me do an intro for you, Florence do an intro for you, Tech do an intro, and then they cycle them out. And they're like, you're listening to the da-da-da show with Walter Strong. And the shows that do that are normally very successful shows who have very big guests. So my podcast that I mentioned earlier, Rebel Force Radio, which is a Star Wars show, whenever they get a guest, they get them to do an intro. And then they reuse that intro over and over again. And it's like, you're listening to Dave Filoni, and this is Dave Filoni, and you're listening to the Rebel Force Radio, my favorite podcast, and it's like, and it blows up. And those type of things do super well.
Definitely. We're talking about the importance of how to start a successful podcast. That podcast show, you know, that you said you were going to start 6 months ago, a year ago. Yeah, I'm pointing the finger at myself, not just you, but myself. And so we're gonna break these 8 questions down. So we got 4 more to go. If you're just joining us, let us know in the chat where you're watching us from, whether on YouTube or LinkedIn. Give us a hashtag Team Replay if you're watching the replay up to this point. Tip number 5, or question number 5: what is more important? Downloads. So I've started, and wow, I'm getting excited because I've asked all my friends, my family, my online content creators, download. But really, what is more important? Downloads or podcast consumption?
So when it comes to podcasting, again, what is more important? It's a tough one. I mean, none of it's really that important, to be completely honest. I think it's okay. So like when it comes to podcasting, there's like a number of different metrics that get thrown around. And the problem is they're all very similar, but they're not the same. So there's downloads, there's plays, which would probably be more like podcast consumption, people actually playing it. There's subscribers. So there's downloads, plays, subscribers. They're the main real 3. Now, what are the differences? Download is somebody who has downloaded the actual episode onto their device.
Okay.
So it means that it's downloaded from the RSS feed and they have it. Play is that they've actually played it. So play can be played, but it can also be played via stream. So it doesn't mean that there's some people listen to their podcast but don't download them. It gets very confusing. So some people just stream it, they don't download it. And so that is a different thing. And so they're different metrics. And then there's also subscribers, also known as followers in Apple. And that is people who subscribe to your show, or followers, I think, in Spotify. As followers, subscribe, they're all different names. And that's just subscribers like on YouTube. It's people who actually subscribe to it. Now, people who subscribe most of the time will auto-download anyway. As like a default. It's like when you subscribe, it auto-downloads. So what is more important? Truthfully, the most important one is plays, because the people who the plays are the people who play it. How important they are is very, very little. They have very little relevance to most podcasters. They are hard because, and the reason being is that they're normally not going to be very high. They're very low in comparison to everything else. So, which one is more important to sponsors and stuff? It will be downloads, because that's the largest metric, and like to CPMs and stuff, and like, yeah, the CPM, I think the how much you get paid per 1,000 for like a sponsorship deal or an ad deal. That would be done on downloads, but realistically, like the numbers that were required to that are very high. The vast majority of us, there's more important things to measure, and I think the most important thing to measure is consistency, like upload consistency. The rest of them I wouldn't be worried too much. But podcast consumption is probably the most of, if you wanted to pick all 3, it would probably be the plays that would be the most important thing. But to see that, by the way, you wouldn't see that in your hosting platform. You'd have to go into individual, like Spotify and Apple. You have to go, most platforms just do downloads. The hosting platforms like Buzzsprout and stuff, they pretty much only do downloads. And then that's the issue comes back up about RSS, which is this idea of comes with pros and cons. That's the reason why it's very hard to monetize, because they cannot get all the data. So it makes sense. And I'm trying to make it make sense, but it's quite complicated.
Gotcha. Now, Tech has a question here. He says, with YouTube, pattern disruptions is hyped as a recorded.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, so it says, with YouTube, pattern disruption is hyped as needed. Is that needed with audio podcast? Not as much, no. So pattern disruption, if you think like we need like things happening, no, not as much. It is needed as a video podcast. Not, again, still probably not as much, but it is still required, because you're bringing a video element into it. and you're playing in the YouTube space, so you do need to follow the YouTube space, and then what they do, but not for an audio podcast. For an audio podcast, the thing with audio that people misunderstand is or not but people don't think about is to get someone through to actually listen to your show is the hard bit. Once they're on the point of listening to you, as long as that first 5 minutes is pretty solid, it's a lot harder for them to change, because most of the time they'll put their phone in their pocket, they'll be walking the dog, they'll be on a bike ride, they'll be in the gym. So the action of them getting to you is harder, but the action of them leaving is a lot harder as well. Unlike YouTube, where you've got 20 other videos on the side that it's saying, if you don't like this one, there's another 20 other ones you might like.
Mm-hmm.
So the pattern interrupts are less important, so to speak, which means you get away with a lot of stuff with podcasting in that way, which is why that whole intro, the person you were talking about before, whoever they may be, I would disagree with them before that, but maybe not in the intro. But yeah, so it's not as neat, as important. But tech, if you are going to do video podcasting, then an element of that is needed, which is like what you're doing with slides here and stuff, bringing slides in, bringing us full screen, you doing like bringing me on and making me full screen, you full screen. All of these things are just enough really for video podcasting. Gotcha.
All right. Question number 6. What is the best podcast strategy? Now I'm trying to remember why I even phrased the question this way. Okay. Some, as you said, traditionally it's audio, but now with the evolution of podcasting video, as a new beginner, should I just jump right into doing audio and video, or should I get my feet wet with audio and transition slowly over to video, or do vice versa? Just since I'm on YouTube, do it this way. What do you feel for a new beginner's best strategy?
I think it's again, all these questions are very much, it depends. So it really depends on where you're coming at it from. Mm-hmm. I'll take it from a Huddle community perspective, because I know the people in the group, and then I'll take it from like an outsider perspective. Mm-hmm. So from a Huddle community perspective, the best strategy is to lean on what you're doing currently and then use it as audio afterwards. So mm-hmm. You're all avid live streamers. And so I think video podcasting is best. Video podcast is best because it gives you room to play everywhere. So that mm-hmm. is by far the gold standard. The gold standard of video podcasting is like well-produced video elements that can be clipped and shorts and all of that. That is the best strategy. And so I think oftentimes live streamers are probably the best people for podcasting, and yet they don't do it because I think they overcomplicate. But most live shows, you're already doing all the right things apart from the just the uploading to the RSS feed, really. There's a couple of other things you can do, but so you're already doing the best strategy. So the best strategy for me, we come at it from a live streaming perspective and use it as a way to engage your audience more and give them more ways to consume your content. Because, like, let's take Florence, maybe her Friday live stream. Someone might want to consume that when they're in the gym, and they might not be able to watch it, and they might not have YouTube Premium. And it's one of those things that just instantly gives you access. So it just makes you more accessible. Mm-hmm. So that's the best strategy. If I was a beginner, then flip it on the other way. Non-Huddle community, this is a clip and whatever, or you find me through search for what we're doing with the Huddle now. I would say, if you know nothing about video, don't get too caught up on it at the beginning. Just do audio and start with that, and then you can always improve it. So, because with video comes a lot more problems and a lot more things to know, and a lot more, like we were literally chatting about it off air about tech problems, and internet problems, and that type of stuff doesn't come up with audio, but it absolutely comes with video. So, like, to give some example of myself, I have a podcast that I've just been playing around with, which is a sub niche of my main mortgage podcast. It's the insurance industry. And that show, what's the best strategy to start it? That show is audio only. It's once a week, and I'll do it for 6 months. And if there seems to be an appetite for it and I enjoy it, then I'll go all in on video and live streams and all of that stuff, but I wouldn't overcommit at the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Tech says here, I've been spinning the audio off from the live streams as my podcast for about 3 years. Strangely, my best year ever. Okay.
I think it's also compounding. So Tech, you've said this is maybe you're getting better, or maybe, why has it been your best year over 3 years? Just compounding. If you've got so many episodes, it just becomes, it's a numbers game and a time thing with podcasting. If you've got 10 episodes, I can only binge 10, but if you've got 200, I can binge 200. And I think and those numbers get crazy high over a longer time horizon. If you're doing like daily, I do it with daily shows. And if you do daily shows for about a year, it gets dangerously high. The numbers really, even because all you need is 50 people downloading an episode. But if you've got 50 people downloading an episode and you're doing it every day, and then some people trickle in, it becomes quite monstrous. So that's probably why it is, Tech, is that you've been doing it for 3 years. Most people would have failed by now. So that's really good.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Hey, we are up to this point right now. We're excited here. So we got best strategies. Let me go over to here. Boom. Best strategies. So if you are really getting great value out of this, I need a big favor from you. Click that thumbs up button, hit the like button, share this with another content creator who maybe has similar questions, just like Tech has been asking. And let's encourage our fellow creators. And if you're new here, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel. Click the alert notification button so you can come back and enjoy some more great content from live streaming to content creation and podcasting. All right. Question number 7. What is the best way to get podcast reviews? Should I just outright and say, please give me reviews? Please please rate my podcast? Or is there a better strategy that a new beginner should consider?
Yeah, sure. So pretty much the only platform that does this is Apple. So that's something to point out, because I had a conversation with somebody this week, and they were saying, I wanted to do a review on Spotify and I can't find the review. And I was like, oh yes, because it doesn't exist. They don't have it. It's only an Apple thing. How to do it. I have one show that's got like 50 odd reviews for it, and it's done well. Reviews are very hard to get. Very hard to get. Now, the big shows like Gary Vaynerchuk and Alex Hormozy and shows like that, they have a lot of reviews because they have a lot of reciprocity. They help a lot of people. It's a numbers game. People are going to give them reviews. But it's hard. The vast majority of like very successful podcasters will have like 10 reviews, and you're like, wow, that's not, there's not much. So it is quite difficult. Now, when it comes to getting reviews, from my experience, the best way to get reviews is don't just ask, because they will not do it. People won't do it. Some people will, but the vast majority won't. The way to do it is you need to have a reason for doing it. So it's normally a value exchange is probably going to be the best one.
Okay.
It's an incredible way for that's the way to do it. So I know with mine, that's what I did. I did very much a value exchange. I very much just came along with the beginning and was like, if I had a Facebook group and I was like, if you've got value, this would really mean the world to me. And this is where it's important about creating a lot of content, create a community and building something. Because if you said, can you do this for me? I'd be like, yes, of course, like straight away, versus people. So that's it really has to come down to that. Free courses are very good for this. That's one way of doing it. Having a free opt-in course, emailing people if you've enjoyed it. Would you mind? It's definitely a hard thing to do, but it isn't something I would worry too much about personally. Doesn't have that much of an impact. Just get your friends and family to do them for a bit, and you only need a 3 or 4 and you'll be all right. You'll put 3 or 4 and it'll put you in the top percentage. And remember, it's only Apple, so it's only those people, and it's also geo locked. So like if you I only see the reviews from the UK. only that, like, you know, nowhere else. Like I don't see them anywhere else. So if I put a VPN on, I can see them. Oh, I got a review in the Philippines, and I have a lot more reviews than I am aware of, because you only see the ones in your country. So it's not that big a deal, to be completely honest. I probably wouldn't worry about it.
Gotcha. Marcus brings up a great question, and good morning, sir. So glad that you're joining us over there in Switzerland this morning over here on the Huddle. Marcus brings up a great follow-up question. Is there a way for listeners to, similar, just like we're engaging in a live stream, to be able to like and comment like on YouTube, other than just to rate and review like on Apple?
Yeah, there is in Spotify for podcasters. Yes, so Spotify does have this feature. They have like Q&A, they have polls, they have engagement, so like questions you can ask them, and so yes, there is. Only on that though, right now. I don't think, again, this all comes back to this issue of not being hosting where you post at the same time, you know, so it's not hosting where the directories are. It's the same problem when something, which is, by the way, I think we can probably talk about YouTube podcasting, I'm sure, at some point, but this is the problem, and it might be a problem that YouTube can fix. But yeah, right now that you have to go to your listeners on Spotify could do it, but then you have to go and check it on Spotify. Your listeners on Amazon can't then do it. Your listeners on Apple can't do it. One way to get around this, Marcus, you could have a Facebook group. I do talk about it a lot on my YouTube channel about, like, I encourage Facebook groups as a podcaster. I think it's a good idea. I encourage it as a YouTuber, to be completely honest, because it's way more community led as opposed to a YouTube, which is very one person talking to another. So it's a one person talking to many. Groups are many people talking to each other, but there's no real way around it. It's kind of annoying. I know that Tech's saying here he points his listeners to Twitter or Instagram to reach out. You can do that. That's a really good way. It's one of the ways I do it for my podcast. Instagram has become that. I get DMs a lot on Instagram and stuff, but it's still not very cohesive, and it doesn't feel. I wish they had some of that, but there's just nothing. Like, there's platforms who've tried to do it, but no one has cracked it. I don't think they will, by the way. It's not. That's the problem with this decentralization of hosting and stuff, is there's just not enough data to be able to house everything in one place.
Gotcha. Hey, let's get over to question 8. What is the best way to deal with imposter syndrome when you're first starting out as a new podcaster?
I think we all have this. We all have this all the time. Like, I was literally saying to you off air, like, I've just swapped to Ecamm, or not swapped, but started using Ecamm, and I'm getting imposter syndrome doing that, because I've done like 4 years of StreamYard, and so or 3.5 years of StreamYard. So I'm like, all of a sudden, like, oh, do I know what I'm doing? So imposter syndrome comes with everything. I think the way to deal with it, I know for myself, I can only talk about it from myself, because everyone will deal with it differently. I approach it in a way of, it'll get better if I just do it more. And that is genuinely, like, one of the things that helps me, if you think, why should I talk about this stuff? So it's like, I always think, well, why not? That's really it. Why not? You know, why should you be interviewing me about this? Why should Walter Strong have the Huddle? Why should, you know, like, Florence Equip Institute actually, do a live stream on productivity? What gives her the right? And then it comes to the point of, well, what doesn't give her the right? Do you know what I mean? It's one of those scenarios. And I think it is very much Marcus saying, trust yourself. I think that's the point. And I think the imposter syndrome thing really, it gets us all. It gets me, or still it doesn't stop, because all that's going to happen for all of you who are thinking about starting is you're going to move into another arena. So you'll master that arena. You'll be the bottom of the arena. You'd have no idea what you're doing. You'll be terrified. You'll master it, and then you'll move up. And when you move up, you all of a sudden step into a new arena where you're the bottom again, and imposter syndrome. And that's good. That's resistance. That's adaptation. That's really good stuff. So I don't think it's a bad thing. But what I do think is you have to push through that bit at the beginning. There is nothing, health, life, everything, and it's especially with this podcasting. When you do something for the first time, you will suck. Like, it's going to be bad. And other people, by the way, and I remember watching Sean Cannell talk about this, saying, like, he gets way too much praise now and nowhere near enough praise when he started. I remember him watching on, and he was saying that, he said it's just not, it's over-indexed now that everyone's like, you're amazing, and he was like, and it's way too much. He's nowhere near as good as people think he is, but he was way better than all of the horrible stuff that people said to him at the beginning and no one gave him any credit. And it's the same type of thing. It's the same type of thing. You have to be prepared to just jump in and go after it and trust in yourself. And it kind of goes back right to question, I think 2, or maybe question 3, sorry. When you say, when is the best time to start?
Yes.
It's that. It's this idea of when you know exactly what it is you want to talk about, you've done your research on it, you are ready. You are ready to go at that point. Now, don't get me wrong, you should feel stupid if you jump in and have nothing to say. And you've just
right.
I'm a big Star Wars fan. I love it. I've mentioned it loads of times in here. It's literally my only thing I do outside of this stuff. And the truth is, I wouldn't do a Star Wars podcast because I don't feel comfortable doing it. I watch hundreds of hours of this stuff. I know loads about it, but I still don't feel comfortable because it's not something I've planned. So so that imposter syndrome should feel right because I have no idea what I'm doing because I've not planned it. But if I've spent some and did my prep, my show prep, did my show flow, did everything ready as all the stuff and then I turned around and then I feel imposter syndrome, then that's really one of those moments where it's like, okay, you don't have to don't listen to yourself. And that's where, like Marcus has put in the chat there, the best time is always to start is always now. I agree with that, but I also disagree in some ways, is not with what you're saying, Marcus, but I agree with it. But I think that the mistake that's a lot of times is people are like, start now, so they pick up the camera and they go, and I'm like, no, plan the show.
Plan it out. Plan it out.
Show, because you will not feel silly and imposter syndrome will go down the more you do that, which is exactly what probably Marcus is saying. It's exactly, but that stuff gets taken out of context and people are like, just do it. And I'm like, no, spend an hour, get that show flow. And it's the reason goes right back to what you said. What did I like about you? Why am I still friends with you now after like over a year and I watch your content every week? Is because you prepare it. It's so obvious that your content is prepared and that you give it the time. And so because you give it the time, I can imagine that will see that then I'll come and watch it because you've given it the time, which makes you look more authoritative, which will make you feel less of an imposter. Even if you do have imposter syndrome coming in, there'll be moments in your head going, but I know this. I do know this.
Yes.
I've prepped enough to be able to pretend. And it's that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Sorry,
yes.
Go on this
great point. Great point. The preparation. It's funny, before we get into text question, I've been using CANVA to kind of practice my podcast intros.
Yeah.
And I must have done maybe over 10 different takes because I kept saying, why do I sound so bad audio wise, but when I'm doing this live video, I sound so much better. I kept going over and over. I was like, why can't, and I get to this. And then finally I said to myself, you can't allow imposter syndrome to cause you to feel like that you can't do this. You do a live stream 52 times out of a year.
Yeah.
And you say, you stutter, but you still keep moving on. But I just got stuck at the intro and I said, okay, I'm gonna practice tomorrow. So maybe if I just go ahead and the same way I plan out the live stream, just go ahead and plan out the whole podcast and go through it a couple of times. Eventually the confidence will come.
I remember interviewing, and I'll leave it very short, but I remember interviewing a guy many, many years ago. It was one of my first or second interviews I ever did. And he was a fear specialist. It was during right in the peak of lockdown? It was one of the first ones I'd done, which was outside of my circle. It was like I'd reached out to this guy, and he was a fear specialist with behavioral psychology. And he said something which was very amazing, which was, and it was imposter syndrome and stuff. And he said, don't practice till you get it right. Practice till you cannot get it wrong. And he said, and I remember that sticking in my head because he said, that's the bit. He said, you don't want to practice till you get it right. Practice till you can't get it wrong. And he said, and if you do that, you'll be great. And that's what I mean about the daily live shows and stuff, and just keep going, is keep going, and it will become second nature.
Gotcha. Let me go back and find text question. Okay. So he mentioned here about he posting his shows on his websites for his podcast, but I've seen the option to include transcripts with my podcast uploads. Is there a good opportunity that I should use? Is the script the best way?
Okay, that makes sense. So this is a great question. So yeah, you post show notes to your website for my podcast, but now, So the one thing I would say, transcripts are offered in there, so that's a good idea. You can use transcripts. There's a difference between a transcription and a show note. Obviously, I know you know this tech, but I'm just saying. So your transcription is if you want to upload it into the podcast app, then do. But don't put it on your website as well, because you want to check that they're not both search indexed, because if they're both search indexed, then that's duplicate content and it will penalize you, which people don't know about. So, or not a lot of people know about. Some people do, some people don't. I don't know how many people know that much about marketing. So I'm sure you probably do, tech, because I don't teach you how to suck eggs. But it's one of those scenarios where so the transcript, wherever you do, don't duplicate it on a search indexed thing. YouTube isn't search indexed. Your podcast itself isn't search indexed on Apple and stuff like that. It can be, but not in the same way. But if you're hosting it with, let's say like Buzzsprout's website they give you you can actually turn it off. So you can have a feature that turns it off. So you can say, don't appear in search engines, and it'll turn that off. But if that's on, and you're uploading your transcript to your podcast and also to your host and also to your website, then you're duplicating it. So that comes down to the decision of where do you want to put it? Do you want them to go to your website, or do you want them to go to your podcasting place? If it was me, I'd probably go to my website if you have that facility, because you're building traffic and building your own website up. So that's a great place to do. Descript is absolutely a great way to do it. Just copy and paste it across. I'm not a big advocate of doing too much editing on my transcripts. I know that's probably not great, but it takes up a lot of time and doesn't do much. So, but your show notes is a different thing. Your show notes should obviously just be your small show notes. And I would probably say for show notes, I would be using something like ChatGPT AI and using that to write up a nice little blog to go underneath on the website. And that would probably help with discoverability as well.
Perfect. I want to say good morning to a first-time guest here on the Huddle, Mr. Every or Mrs. Every Day's a Saturday USMC veteran. We want to truly thank you for gracing us with your presence this morning, and we pray that what we've shared so far here on the Huddle on how to start a successful podcast, want to encourage you to definitely be a part of Team Replay and go back and watch the replay. And truly grateful for you here. And if you have served in the military, we want to thank you for your service as well. Then we got to also say good morning to our dear auntie, Denise Jordan, from This and That. Thank you so much for definitely being a part of the Huddle. Marcus says the best time in the start is always now. This is true. Gotta just, and learning from Ash, being prepared from now, because I remember my early days, Marcus, and just doing live streaming, and I would just go live. And looking at some of those earlier live streams, there was very little preparation to it. I just got up there and went live, but the preparation level was there. And then as I learned, especially when I started wanting to interview people, I had to make sure that I got to have some type of level of preparation. So we're going to get this right, Marcus. We're all going to get it right. Let's get over into summary. So summary here.
I think Marcus got a question, by the way, about Squarespace. It says, is Squarespace okay to host? Yeah, it's fine. That's the question. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Oh, here you go. You've got different questions.
Okay. The questions are jumping. Hold on.
Okay. So we've got, do you want me to, yeah, Marcus has said, is Squarespace okay to host the podcast? Probably not the best, but I've already have the site there. Yeah, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Like, again, the whole idea of Squarespace, GoDaddy, I use those for mine. The issue they have is that they have a lot of code, and that's why they don't do as well in search, because they have like a lot of code that's kind of dead code. I only know this because one of my friends is that big SEO. That's his entire business in the mortgage business. He tells me all about it. tells me off for having a GoDaddy website all the time. But like, it's absolutely fine, Marcus. It will rank in search. It will do well if you do it. Whatever is easiest for you, it works absolutely fine. And then Tech's got it on there.
Okay, let's go to Tech. And this is a great one. So as a new beginner, what is some of the best ways for a new? Should I just go straight to solo podcasting? Because my style in the past historically has been interviewing. Should I look to do interviewing podcasts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think he put a question up at the top as well about this, did he? I think. Yeah, he said, Ash, you've said previously, just because I want to give more context. Sure. He put Ash, are you? So I'm trying to find it in the chat. Ash, you have said previously solo podcasts are better. Why is that? Why is that, or is that still true? By myself, I think I'm boring. Okay, got you now. And that adds context to solo podcast better. Okay. That would guess. Okay. So it's not that they're better or worse, Tech. What it is, and actually I gave this advice to you, Walter, didn't I, about you like go and stop interviewing people and go out there. So they're not better or worse. They're different, and they create very different outcomes. So this is why it's really important to understand. So if you're trying to, and I remember getting this advice, and this advice actually was from some of you will know him, and he has a channel called Film Booth. So it's Ed Lawrence from the Film Booth, and he's also got just launched another channel called Creator Booth. So Ed, he lives quite close to me down here, but I had him on my podcast about 3 years ago, I think, maybe just before he blew up. He was the kind of like small fry at the time. But what he said was, which was something very important, he said to me after the show, he said, what's your goals? And I was talking to him, I'd interviewed lots of people, and he said, if you're trying to be seen as the expert, you're not going to be seen as an expert by interviewing other experts, because you're now just facilitating them to talk about what they're good at. He said, if you want to be seen as an expert, you have to be the expert, which kind of comes back to your imposter syndrome thing of like stepping into the shoes and going, okay, if I want to do this, I have to be the person who's seen as that. So that started to shift my belief on solo podcast versus interview, because I was doing interview. So where are the benefits of an interview? The benefits of an interview is networking. It is networking. Me and Walter would not have known each other if you hadn't reached out to me to come on this show like 18 months ago. I wouldn't know you, Tech, if I hadn't met you through Walter and then been on your shows. So the value is the network and community. But do not fool yourself to think that you'll grow anything very large, because the truth is you're not bringing any real value other than sending other people to look at other things. If that's all you do, if it's all you do. So people are just going to come to you to go and see who they should look at. Great channel of this is like, what's his face? But Benji's channel, what is it? What was it called?
Video influence used to be like that. Yes. Yeah.
So it used to be like that, where no one's going to video influencers to see video influencers. They're going to see who they should be following and see if it's any good. That's quite important. So if your goal is to network, that's really great. If your goal though is to try and build a YouTube channel, and this is the bit that I was looking at, if you want to build a YouTube channel, become an expert influencer, stuff like that. Denise is in the chat now, says like that. So like a great example with you, Denise, like Denise interviewing people probably wouldn't benefit. Well, it could, but there's lots of things. But like, so if you want to be known as the expert in homemaking and in your niche, then you need to leverage your expertise, which is what you did. You did this when we had this conversation, and it's worked tremendously. We didn't have a Huddle community when you didn't do. Now we do.
This is true. This is true.
Because you're the main focus. So it's not which one is better. It's just what the goal is. Now, once you're quite established, and this is we answer the question for Walter bringing on here. Once you're established and you've built up an authority as someone as a solo, you can then bring guests in sporadically. And that is really good, because that enhances your expertise, because now you're somebody worth knowing and you're bringing other people in who are worth knowing. So if I interview people now in my mortgage podcast, for example, I try and do one a week now, that increases my network, because if you just sit in an echo chamber and talk to yourself, you will literally just be talking to yourself. So you do want this. Once you've built up an authority base, then it's worth doing. So like my podcast Creators Hub's YouTube channel, I will interview people on that. But the base thing that everyone's going to do, my competitors and friends who are not competitors, because I'm not, it's not business, but friends of mine who have YouTube channels about podcasting, all they'll do is do long 1 hour, 2 hour live streams about educating stuff, and or they'll bring people on. But if I spent a year building a channel that's solo and then brought those people on, it's way more beneficial. So it comes back to what you want, really. But it just comes like that's the long answer to that. But it really is quite. No one looks at them that way. They think that we'll do an interview podcast. Like Tech, you're a great one. Is I would much rather watch a solo show of you, Tech, and I've been on your interview shows, and I like your interview shows. But I think that you're super interesting. Exactly how I felt about Walter. I was listening to Walter and skipping the guest talking because I'm interested in hearing what you've got to say. And that's when I was like, I just want to hear what you have to say. So it's a similar Florence as well.
Definitely. So here are the summaries, and then, like we said, we're already jumped over to the questions. Sorry. But no, this is great. We've talked about what is a podcast, what's the best podcasting hosting, when should you start your episodes, the importance of having a voiceover, someone doing your intro, mid part or outro. We talked about the downloads, the consumption, the best strategy, the best way to ask for reviews, but most importantly, dealing with that small imp. Notice I didn't give him any power or beast, little small imp called Imposter Syndrome. So definitely check out the replay if you're just joining us up to this point. But since we are already on to questions, here is a question for the audience. And I'm jumping all over the place. So you got all this great information. Are you an individual who's have a podcast, but you're kind of stuck, or you're like me, you need to start a podcast as an extension of what you have here, but there is a point where you're stuck. So for me, Ash, I've gotten a lot of clarity on. I just need to go ahead and plan these episodes out properly, like I've been doing with the live streams. But where I've where my part where I has been stuck this week is being able to get comfortable with myself, listening to myself with audio.
Yeah,
I can listen to myself with the live stream, but it's like, oh gosh, that was bad. And maybe part of that is because I used to be in the music and recording industry.
Yeah.
And so before you go into the recording studio, you listen to yourself off mic. But then when you hear yourself on mic, you're like, oh no, I can't say it that way. Oh, that's bad. And you're spending 30 minutes just stuck on the intro. So that's where I've been stuck, and you've definitely helped me. But in the chat, where are you stuck at? What's your question on where you're stuck at, so we can get you out of the hangar to the runway to take off? Definitely need to know that. So that's that there from there. Your thoughts on me just getting out of the hangar while we're waiting for some questions.
I got loads of thoughts. I was trying to be quiet, so I didn't because I go over them. So my thoughts on yours is really interesting. I can't understand why are you doing a separate audio show into this?
I don't have the clarity on it yet. I'm like, I've liked the way this format has went out. So I'm like, okay, I could definitely use this as a starting point.
I would just have this. Like, this is a podcast. And like, this has been my thing with you since a year ago that you said you were going to do it. You already do a podcast. You do a very well produced video podcast every single week. Just because it's live and you engage, the people who are going to listen to your podcast are the people who are in the chat. You would make probably a lot of us here and probably give me a thumbs up, Denise. If it's like, and people who are like, they miss the show. So they're like, oh, I missed that show. But knowing that as soon as you come off the show, one of the things you do is you just download the show and you upload it to Spotify for podcasters, and it goes out to Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. I know then when I walk my dog in the evening, I can go, oh, okay, it's all right. I'll pick up Walter's show. Doesn't matter. And it doesn't increase your views on YouTube, but it does give the convenience to everybody else, and also share it with people who would potentially don't do YouTube. So I don't think for you to record a separate show would make no sense. It would just make no sense to me, because your shows are good podcasts.
But see, I've heard people say that you have to be sensitive to your audience, because when you're doing a live stream, you're engaging with your audience that's live and replay, but the podcast audience is different. So you can end up hurting the audio part of it.
Worry about that.
Because I mean, and I kind of say, okay, and I'm the type of person, I'll take information and go, maybe I'll just take and go, oh yeah, maybe that's true. I better do that.
I wouldn't worry about that. Like, so what I mean by that is like, these are all like, I'm from like the fitness industry years ago, and it's one of these things is like, everyone's always asking, what supplements should I take? What supplements should I take? And it's like, they're going to do 1%. Like if you're lucky, it's the rest of it is eat well and move more. And that's 99% of it. The rest of it, is all about, is that. So with that, like when people say like, you gotta be, and I get it. I do get it. There is but if you, it all comes down to how you, there's a thing called the halo effect. So it's all about how you frame it. So if you are a live show that has audio, that's it. This is a live show. Welcome to, like, we are live. You said at the beginning, we are live. Da, da, da. People who are listening to that will know you're live. They know that you've been live. Like, I'm listening to that show. Denise had listened to that show. Like, it's not a big deal. That's a very old school. Now, don't get me wrong. It is an old school elitist thing, but it also is something that's like, if we're getting into the weeds, if we're really going into like, you are now a podcaster by trade. Yes. Yes, you shouldn't be uploading. If you're a podcaster by trade, then yeah, you should probably do a live show, then make something else separate. But you're not that. This is your hobby. You help people with this, and it's just creating more convenience. I think that is for many people, and this is something that many people get confused. A live show is fine. Like, it is fine if you call them out. Like, if you've got people in the chat, they're hearing. The trick, the most important thing, which I know something you might feel uncomfortable with, which is the reading, is making sure you read it clearly so the person listening to it knows what you're saying. Now, that's not a problem. You could have a questions and answer section at the end and then clip that off in here very easily if you wanted. Okay. But it's more like, so like text question here, and this is a mistake that people make with live streaming to podcasting, is I would normally, if I were live streaming, I'd be like, oh yeah, Tech, great question. What you do is this. But the podcast listener doesn't know what he said. So I have to go, okay, so Tech's just asked a question and he said, I renamed my YouTube channel 2 years ago. And so what you do is you're just creating a visual audio thing. But you do this. You do it all the time. So I just think you need to get Spotify podcasters today and start uploading them. Okay.
All right. Hey. There we go.
I didn't answer Tech's question. Sorry.
No. Let's go back to Tech.
What was his thing? He said, I renamed my YouTube channel 2 years ago, and I want to rename and launch a podcast as Tech Troublemaker. You renamed it. I want to rename and launch the podcast as.
Is it a good idea? Should he?
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
I will say this, Tech. And I, in my practicing of just trying to do an intro, I kept saying, welcome to the Huddle podcast show. I'm your host, Walter Strong. This morning, we're going to be talking about how to start a successful podcast. And that flowed. But when I tried to do, good morning, I'm your host, Walter. No, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Huddle with Walter Strong III. I'm your host. But when I put that whole sentence in there, Walter Strong III, it seemed too lengthy for me. So then my next thought was, okay, if I do it, welcome to the Huddle podcast show. Does that become a problem from a search standpoint on Apple or Sprinkler because someone else has the Huddle?
No, it's fine. It's not because they're not really searching it. So I'll go into texting in a minute, but like, no, they're not searching it because search is pretty bad on, but no, it doesn't really matter. You with podcasts, the listeners are going to come. They're not coming from search. They're coming from other avenues. So nearly all your podcast listeners are going to come from YouTubers who know exactly people who are watching you on YouTube. Okay. Or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, but they're not going to, with a title like The Huddle, there's going to be millions of huddles. You need to have your name on it, Halter with Walter Strong, or just The Huddle. Like The Huddle, there's lots of different ways, but it's not a a problem at all. I think you're also overthinking it, man. Don't worry about it. You'll be absolutely fine.
Well,
But
from a standpoint, like you said, there's so many huddles. I would certainly brand it as the huddle with Walter Strong the
yeah,
third.
you'd have to be the huddle with Walter Strong.
But when I go into my intro, praise the Lord, praise the Lord, welcome to the huddle. I'm your host, Walter Strong. I would just do it like that, but from a branding standpoint, it would still have the huddle with Walter Strong the third.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I was getting in my head saying, am I going to get myself in trouble?
You don't even have to start like that. You just literally start like text, but here I have no intro. I just go straight into the hook. Like that's what you put down there. Just then you know, like, yeah, I you can go straight in. I don't have a thing. You don't have to worry about it. Just talk. Just it's that goes back to number one. What was a podcast? It's a conversation. It's a conversation. That's all it is. It's a conversation with you and the listeners, you and the community, you and the guest, whatever. It's a conversation. And so it is one of those of, oh, I did that wrong. Okay, it's so fun. You just say, hi, welcome to the show. Oh, I just messed that up, but it's okay. I hope you're having a good day. I'm obviously having a great day, but hopefully we're going to have a better show than that. Like straight away, people would like that. Now, Tech, just on his question, I didn't answer it because me and you got, I want to rename it. Yeah, Tech, you can rename it and just launch it as Tech Troublemaker. The thing that's quite important about Tech Troublemaker is, I would say, is one thing I would, again, it goes back to clarity. Are you Tech Troublemaker or is the show Tech Troublemaker? As in the people who are, if I listen to it, am I a Tech Troublemaker? This is going to sound silly, but it's really like type of stuff. Am I a Tech Troublemaker if I listen to it, or are you the Tech Troublemaker? It's and that's a distinction with you that would, I think, if you were a client of mine, I'd dive into, because it'd be like, what is the difference? Because it's very different. If the Podcast Creators Hub, and by the way, that's the easiest way of doing it, creating something that's the huddle. The reason why the huddle does better than Walter Strong is because the huddle is us as opposed to you. And so Tech Troublemaker, like Tech Troublemakers is what I would call it. And I would be Tech Troublemakers podcast. And straight away it's connected. It's like, I'm a tech guy and I think I'm a bit of a rebel. I'll listen to that, you know? It's that type of thing. It's clever little shifts. But find the name that works for you.
Definitely. Man, this has been great. A foundational show. Definitely, we're going to have to do a part 2 to this. We're going to have to do a part 2.
We didn't talk about YouTube podcasting at all, so we have to do one on that.
You know, I thought about it, and then I said, you know what? We got to the beginning. We got to go to the foundation.
That's good. Oh, have you stalled?
The advanced level would be a disservice for all us newbies. So, Ash, if individuals here in the Huddle community want to get more information and connect with you on, or just have a consultation, how do they get in contact with you on getting this podcast launched?
Yeah, sure. Best place to go is go to Podcast Creators Hub, which is my YouTube channel. There is a free podcast course there. It's 5 steps. It's right at the bottom, I think, at the main page. That's it, really. I create content pretty much every day, Monday to Friday on there, all about there. If you've got questions that you'd like answered, ping them over to me and I'll make a video on them. I'm not offering any coaching services or anything like that. It's just completely, as in what I mean by that is if you've got a question, just ask and I'll help you. I'm happy to do that. This is purely a labor of love. Who knows in the future if it becomes something else, but I have so many different irons in the fire that I don't want to make this also a monetized thing. So it's purely just a labor of love. I don't think there's enough people talking about it, and I'm in a unique place to be able to. So it's great fun. So yeah, just drop me a message on the any questions in any video. Just ask a comment, and I check them every day, and I'll answer it.
Great, man. I want to just put you in the green room right quick as we wrap this show up. But thank you so much for taking time out your schedule all the way from London. When he's really from Cambridge, England.
Yeah.
They like, I looked to search you in London. I couldn't find you. He's in Cambridge, England. That's just me.
It's close. It's about an hour.
There you go. All right. Let me just drop you in the green room. And there you have it, Huddle community. We got ourselves a great foundation. And so the question now becomes, when is going to be your launch date? When is your launch date going to be? Don't make the mistake, as Ash said, I've made when I said this a year ago. And I still haven't got out of the hangar to get you the runway place. So I'm committing here live. My launch date for my podcast show is going to be July, the month of July. I want to say July 1st. I just don't have a calendar in front of me. But July 1st, that's my launch date. I am committing live. I need to know from you in the chat, those of you watching the replay, if you're going to start a podcast, what's your launch date? Not 6 months from now, not a year from now, but when's your launch date? And let's help one another take it to the next level from live streaming to podcasting. You don't have to start another separate show when you can basically pull the audio from this. So, hey, if you've gotten great value out of this live stream show this morning, please click the like button, give us a thumbs up, share this on your favorite social media platform. And if you have not subscribed, we want to go ahead and hit these requirements of what YouTube wants, 1,000 subscribers. So your subscription of subscribing, I don't see you just as a number. I see you as a person. So you will definitely be acknowledged as you subscribe. So as we close this out, I want to close this out by simply encouraging you to let you know you may feel broken today in some part of your life, whether emotionally, mentally, or even physically. I want to encourage you today. Broken crayons still color. Regardless of how broken you may feel, in the hands of a child can create its greatest masterpiece, not with brand new crayons, but broken crayons. God bless.